The moment Jennifer handed me the box, I knew something was horribly wrong. I opened it, expecting a thoughtful gift for our anniversary, but instead, it was 3 DNA test kits, each with a photo of one of our kids. Each photo had a name written on the back, names of men who weren't me. I froze, my mind scrambling to understand. My heart raced. What was this? My hand shook as I looked at the pictures, then back at Jennifer. She didn't even flinch, didn't even look guilty. "They're not yours," she said, her voice flat. "I've been sleeping with other men for years. Those are their kids." I stumbled back, feeling like the ground was ripped from beneath me. "What the hell are you talking about?" I managed to gasp, but she barely reacted. She just shrugged, as if it was the most normal thing in the world. "They're your kids if you want them to be," she added nonchalantly, her eyes cold. "But they're not. And honestly, I don't care what you do now. I'm done." Before I could even get a word out, she turned and walked toward the door, grabbing her purse and tossing one last, chilling line over her shoulder. "I'm out. Don't waste your time asking questions. You already know everything." And just like that, she was gone. My wife had just dropped the truth I had never seen coming. I was left alone, holding DNA tests and photos of strangers. It was the end of everything I thought I knew. I stood there in silence, the weight of what Jennifer had just said crashing down on me. It felt like the room was closing in, my breathing shallow, my heart pounding in my chest. Everything around me seemed distant and blurry as I looked at the DNA test kits again, still not believing what I was seeing. For a long moment, I couldn't move. It was as if my body was frozen in disbelief. How could this be real? How had I not noticed? We had 3 kids together. We had a life, memories, years of moments that now felt like a lie. I wanted to scream, to confront her, to demand answers. But she was gone. The sound of the door clicking shut echoed in the empty house, leaving me standing there, holding those test kits and pictures of men who weren't me. I stumbled over to the kitchen table and collapsed into a chair. My hands were shaking uncontrollably as I tried to process everything. "This can't be happening," I whispered to myself, almost hoping I was dreaming, hoping that this was all some cruel joke. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. I stared at the photo of our youngest, Ethan. He looked just like me, his eyes, his smile. But now I couldn't even trust my own eyes. I grabbed my phone and called Jennifer, desperate for some kind of explanation, some excuse, some reason for why she'd done this. It rang and rang until finally she answered. "Jennifer, what the hell is this?" My voice cracked, the anger and pain beginning to mix into something dark. "Calm down," she said, as if I were overreacting. "It is what it is. I've been living a lie, and so have you. How could you do this to me? To our kids?" I demanded, barely able to contain the rage bubbling inside me. "For years? With multiple men?" Her response was chilling. "I didn't owe you an explanation. I told you a long time ago that I wasn't happy. You just didn't want to listen." Her voice didn't crack, didn't even sound guilty. I got tired of pretending, of keeping up with the act. I needed more than you could give me. I was stunned into silence. I wanted to shout, to ask more, but the words wouldn't come. It wasn't the answers I expected. There was no remorse, no apology, just cold indifference. "So what now?" I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. "What do you mean?" she responded, almost amused. "There's nothing left to say. You're free to do whatever you want now. I'm leaving. I already told you. I don't owe you anything anymore." Her words hit like a punch to the gut. "I loved you," I said, almost pleading, though I hated how vulnerable I sounded. "I gave you everything. We had a family." "Well," she said dismissively, "I didn't ask for your love. I didn't need it." Her words felt like a knife twisting in my chest. Everything I thought I knew about her, everything we had built together, was now a lie. The woman I'd loved for so many years was gone, replaced by a stranger who had no qualms about destroying our family for her own selfish desires. She ended the call abruptly, and I was left holding my phone, staring at the screen. I couldn't breathe. I felt like I was suffocating under the weight of betrayal. I stood up, pacing the room, trying to make sense of everything. My hands were still trembling, and my thoughts were scattered. I needed answers. I needed to understand how this had happened, how she could have kept it a secret for so long. But then it hit me. She'd been so good at hiding it. All the signs I had ignored, all the times she'd been distant, all the little excuses she'd made when she was late, when she was working or out with friends. The late nights, the messages she deleted from her phone, the way she'd turned cold and distant over the past few years. I had convinced myself it was just stress, that it was normal. I had trusted her blindly. I sat back down on the couch, holding my head in my hands. The tears I'd been holding back for so long finally started to fall. The pain was unbearable, but what hurt more was the realization that I had been blind to everything. The woman I had trusted, the mother of my children, had betrayed me in the worst possible way. And the worst part? She didn't even care. I couldn't understand it. How could someone do this? How could she destroy everything we had built, everything we had worked for, just like that? I looked at the photos of the other men. One was older, another was younger. I didn't recognize them, but it didn't matter. They had been in my life, in our life, and I hadn't known. I wanted to find them, confront them, make them understand the chaos they had helped create. But then I stopped. There was no point. Jennifer had made it clear. There was no one left to blame but her. I had a choice to make. I could fall apart, let this consume me, or I could take control. But for now, all I could do was sit there, lost in the wreckage of everything that had once been my life. But I knew one thing. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I didn't know how much time had passed before I decided to do it. I couldn't just sit there in shock, staring at the walls of the house we had built together. The images of the DNA tests and the men who weren't me were burned into my mind. The betrayal was still too fresh, too raw. But I couldn't let it go without one final confrontation. She had to answer for this. I grabbed my keys, slammed the door behind me, and drove. My mind raced as I navigated the streets toward Jennifer's favorite cafe. It wasn't too far, just a 10-minute drive, but it felt like an eternity. I wasn't sure what I was going to say when I got there, but I knew I couldn't let this go unanswered. I had to look her in the eye, make her face the destruction she had caused. I didn't care if she ran, if she tried to lie again. I was ready for the truth, whatever it was. When I pulled up, I saw her car parked in the corner of the lot. My heart started pounding. She was here. The weight of everything, the anger, the hurt, the disbelief, hit me all at once. I took a deep breath, steeled myself, and walked into the cafe. She was sitting at a corner table, talking to a man I didn't recognize. Her smile was wide, playful, a stark contrast to the cold woman who had just walked out on me hours ago. The man leaned in closer, whispering something in her ear. I stood frozen at the door, watching, feeling the ground beneath me shift once more. This wasn't just some friendly coffee. This was something else. I forced myself to move. Each step felt heavier than the last as I walked toward their table. She looked up, her eyes widening in surprise when she saw me. But there was no apology, no sign of guilt, just that same indifferent look from earlier. "Brian," she said, raising an eyebrow, as though she had no idea why I was there. I could feel my pulse in my ears, but I spoke with the coldness I was trying to muster. "You need to explain something to me, Jennifer." The man across from her stood up, trying to look casual, but I could see the tension in his body. Jennifer's eyes flicked to him, then back to me. "I'll be fine," she said to the man, her tone dismissive. "I can handle this." He nodded once, gave me a look that was half pity, half curiosity, then walked off toward the counter. I sat down across from her, not waiting for her to offer me a seat. "I want answers. Right now." Jennifer sighed, swirling the coffee in her cup. "I already told you everything you need to know. There's no need to make a scene." "No need to make a scene?" I echoed, my voice rising despite my best efforts to stay composed. "You've been lying to me for years. I deserve more than that, Jennifer. You've been cheating on me, cheating on our kids, and now you're just sitting here, acting like everything is fine." She glanced around the cafe, her eyes scanning the other patrons, then leaned in, lowering her voice. "Look, I don't have to explain myself to you. I told you the truth. I'm done pretending." "Done pretending?" I asked, incredulous. "Done pretending? This is real life, Jennifer. You've ruined everything, and now you're just brushing it off." She didn't respond immediately. Her lips pursed. Then, she shrugged nonchalantly, as if what she was saying wasn't the most earth-shattering thing I'd ever heard. I'm not sorry. You were always so wrapped up in your work and the kids. I needed more than that. I needed someone who could give me attention, who actually cared. I stared at her in disbelief. So, all this time, I was just not enough for you. My voice cracked. All this time, I was trying to give you everything, trying to be the best father, the best husband. And you were out there with him? With all of them. She tilted her head slightly, her gaze hardening. You don't get it, do you? You were never the problem. It's just that you were so focused on being this perfect little family man. You forgot to be a husband. You didn't see me anymore. You didn't see us. The words stung, but there was no time to process them. I felt the weight of everything pressing down on me. Her betrayal, her cruelty, her complete disregard for the life we'd built together. What about the kids, Jennifer? I asked, my voice trembling with anger. What about them? Do they mean anything to you? Her face softened for a moment, but it wasn't pity. It was more like she was justifying herself. Of course they mean something to me, but they don't need to know everything. They're fine, Brian. They're happy. They're better than they would have been if I had stayed in a loveless marriage. Loveless? I repeated, almost choking on the word. You think this marriage was loveless? I spent my life trying to build something with you. Something real. And now you're telling me that everything we had, everything I thought was real, was a lie. She stared at me, unblinking. Yes, and it's over. There's nothing more to say. I'm done. The finality in her words hit like a punch to the gut. There was no pleading, no attempt to make things right. Just cold indifference. I realized then that this wasn't just a betrayal of our marriage. It was a betrayal of everything I had ever believed in. I stood up, unable to sit there any longer. You're a coward, Jennifer. You destroyed everything and didn't even have the decency to be honest with me until it was too late. I hope you're happy with your choices. She didn't respond. She didn't need to. She was already gone, and in a way, I had already let her go. I left the cafe in a daze, the weight of her words still hanging in the air, suffocating me. But I knew one thing for sure now. I couldn't stay in this. Not anymore. The truth had come out, and there was no going back. I walked out of the cafe, my mind still buzzing with the chaos Jennifer had just dropped on me. The air outside felt colder, sharper, like the world had suddenly become a much darker place. I didn't know where I was going, but I needed to move. My hands clenched in a fist at my sides, and I could feel the anger bubbling up inside me, a pressure building in my chest that threatened to explode. I was furious, and I had every right to be. It wasn't just the betrayal of her cheating on me. It was everything. The years of lies, the manipulation, the gaslighting. Jennifer had known exactly what she was doing. She had made me believe in a life, in a future that was nothing but a fantasy. And now, with just a few cold words, she had torn it all down. As I walked aimlessly down the street, my mind kept replaying the conversation we'd just had. Done pretending, she'd said. She dismissed everything we had as if it were nothing more than a nuisance. My life, my love for her, the years we had spent together, they all meant nothing to her. She had moved on, and I was left behind, shattered and empty. I stopped walking and leaned against a nearby lamppost, trying to gather myself. I could feel the tears threatening to spill, but I couldn't let them out. Not yet. I had to be strong, not just for me, but for the kids. I didn't want them to see me fall apart. But how could I not? Everything had changed. The foundation of my entire existence had just crumbled to dust, and I was standing there, trying to hold the pieces together with trembling hands. I needed answers. I needed to know how long this had been going on. I needed to know why, but most of all, I needed to confront the men she'd been with. They had to know what she had done to me, to us. But even as I thought about that, a part of me knew it was pointless. What good would it do to confront them? What could I possibly say? Hey, she was my wife, and you've been sleeping with her behind my back for years. What did that even mean now? She had already made it clear that she didn't care. They didn't care. No one did. I couldn't focus. I had to do something. I had to get out of my head because if I stayed there for too long, I would break down and I couldn't afford that. Not now. Not when I had a family to protect, even if that family no longer included Jennifer. I took a deep breath and pulled out my phone, dialing the one person who might be able to help me through this. My brother, Mark. He wasn't the kind of guy who would pull any punches, and if anyone could help me sort through the mess I was in, it was him. Hey, man, I said when he picked up, trying to sound calm, though I could hear the edge of my voice. What's up? Mark asked, sounding distracted. Are you free? I asked, my voice shaking slightly. I need to talk. Right now. There was a pause on the other end. Yeah, sure. What's going on? I took another deep breath. Jennifer, she's been cheating on me. For years. I just found out. There was a long silence before he spoke again. Jesus, man. I'm so sorry. Where are you? Outside the cafe. I muttered, glancing around. I don't know what to do, Mark. I feel like everything is falling apart. I'm not even sure I can keep it together much longer. I'm on my way, he said, his voice firm. Stay there. We'll figure this out. I'll be there in 10 minutes. I hung up, not really feeling any better, but at least knowing that Mark would be there. He was the kind of person who wouldn't let me spiral. He'd help me find a way out of this mess. As I waited, I couldn't stop thinking about the kids. How would they react when they found out the truth? How would I explain this to them? Would they even understand? They were too young to grasp what had really happened, but they weren't blind. They had seen the way things had changed between Jennifer and me. They had seen the distance, the coldness in her eyes when she looked at me. They knew something was wrong, even if they didn't have the words to express it. It broke me to think about how much pain they were going to feel once the truth came out. They didn't deserve any of this. None of us did. I shook my head, trying to push those thoughts away. I couldn't let myself fall apart. Not yet. Mark pulled up a few minutes later, and I climbed into his truck without saying a word. I didn't need to explain myself. He could see in my eyes the anger, the hurt, the confusion. He didn't ask questions, just drove. For the first time in what felt like hours, I felt a small sense of relief. Mark didn't expect anything from me. He didn't expect me to be strong or composed. He just wanted to help me make sense of this chaos. We drove for a while, through quiet streets and past darkened houses, until we reached a small park. Mark parked the truck and turned to face me. So, he said, his voice low, what now? I ran a hand through my hair, frustration building once more. I don't know, man. I feel like everything I thought I knew is a lie. Jennifer, she's gone, and I'm stuck with this mess. The kids, the house, all the years we spent together, it's all just gone. I don't know what to do. I don't even know where to start. Mark didn't say anything for a moment. He just sat there, watching me. Then, he leaned forward and put a hand on my shoulder. You're going to get through this. You're stronger than you think. I know it doesn't feel like it right now, but trust me, you'll come out of this, and you'll do what's best for the kids. You're not alone in this. His words were simple, but they were enough to make me feel like maybe, just maybe, I could survive this. It wouldn't be easy, and it wouldn't be quick, but I wasn't going to let Jennifer win. She had broken everything I had, but I still had the kids. I still had my family, and I would do whatever it took to make sure they were okay. The next few days were a blur of raw emotion, unanswered questions, and a constant, nagging feeling that I was being dragged into a storm I couldn't control. The days that followed Jennifer's cold departure were the hardest. I couldn't escape the constant weight pressing on my chest, the suffocating feeling of betrayal, and the crushing pain of knowing that everything I had built with her was nothing but a facade. I had avoided talking to her, but the silence between us grew unbearable. She hadn't contacted me since that night at the cafe. No messages, no calls, nothing. It was as if she had erased me from her life, and in a way she had. It was painful, but there was no part of me that wanted to reach out to her either. There was nothing left to say. But as the days dragged on, the questions kept coming. The pictures, the DNA tests. Why had she kept this from me for so long? How many men had she been with? What had she told them about me? The uncertainty gnawed at me like an open wound. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I had to confront the other men. I had to know the extent of her lies. I needed answers, and I wasn't going to let it go until I had them. The first man's name was Ethan. That was the name Jennifer had written on the back of the photo that had been tucked into the box along with the DNA test. I didn't know him, but I had a feeling he knew me, at least in some twisted way. If Jennifer had been with him, he had to have known about me. There was no way he could be completely in the dark about our family. I decided to find him, track him down, and asked him about Jennifer, about what she had told him, about how deep this betrayal really went. My hands trembled as I pulled up his name on my phone. It didn't take long to find his profile. Just a few clicks, and there he was, smiling like a man who had no idea the devastation his actions had caused. I sent him a message, hoping he would respond. I didn't know what I was expecting, maybe an apology, or at least some explanation. But deep down, I knew that whatever I got from him, it wouldn't be enough. Nothing would bring back the life Jennifer had stolen from me. I waited. The minutes felt like hours as I sat in the silence, wondering if he would even reply. Finally, my phone buzzed with a notification. He had messaged me back. His response was short, and in the cold, detached tone I had become so familiar with over the past few days, it read, "I know who you are. I'm sorry. Mom. Jennifer and we've been seeing each other for a while. It was nothing personal. She said things weren't working out with you." I sat there for a moment, staring at the message. Nothing personal? She had built an entire world around the lie that she was still in love with me, that our family was intact. And here I was, talking to one of the men she had been with, someone who had no respect for me or my family. I quickly typed back, my anger flaring. How long? How long has this been going on? Did she tell you about the kids? Did you know they weren't mine? There was a long pause before he responded, and when he finally did, the message was as cold and callous as I expected. "I didn't know about the kids, man. I'm sorry you had to find out like this, but Jennifer, she didn't tell me everything. I thought you were just out of the picture. I didn't want to be involved in all this." I felt sick. It was clear now that Jennifer had told him just enough to keep him on the hook, but not enough to make him feel guilty. She had manipulated him just like she had manipulated me. And it was clear that she didn't care about the impact her actions had on anyone, least of all me. She had betrayed our family. And for what? A thrill? An escape from the life she had grown bored with? I slammed my fist against the table, the anger surging in me again. It wasn't just about the affair. It was about everything. The lies, the manipulation, the total disregard for everything I had done for her. Everything I had sacrificed to make our family work. I looked down at my phone, staring at the message from Ethan. I wasn't sure what I had expected, but this wasn't it. It felt empty. It felt like one more piece of the puzzle that Jennifer had crafted, a puzzle that, now that I could see the pieces clearly, I was never meant to solve. But now I had answers. Answers that I didn't want, but that I needed. And the more I learned, the clearer it became. Jennifer had built an entirely separate life without me, a life that didn't include our marriage, our kids, or any of the things I'd worked so hard to build. I needed to confront her again, face to face. I couldn't let it go. I couldn't let her walk away without acknowledging what she had done. I had to see the look in her eyes when she realized that I knew everything. I had to make her see the wreckage she had caused, not just to me, but to our kids, to everything we had built. I grabbed my keys and left the house again, my mind racing with all the questions I had for Jennifer. The answers I had already gotten weren't enough. I needed to hear it from her. I needed to see her face as I demanded the truth. This was no longer about saving our marriage. It was about standing up for myself, for the life I deserved, and for the future of my kids. Jennifer had crossed a line, and now I was going to make sure she understood just how deeply she had hurt me. The drive to Jennifer's apartment felt like a lifetime. Every passing second was filled with an overwhelming mixture of anger, sadness, and confusion. I couldn't stop thinking about the conversation with Ethan, how coldly he had responded to the revelation. There was no guilt, no regret in his words, just emptiness. And I could feel that same emptiness now settling into my bones as I made my way to her apartment. I had tried to brace myself, to prepare for whatever was coming next, but nothing could truly prepare me for the storm I was walking into. I thought I had already experienced the worst of it, but each new layer of betrayal seemed to peel back another painful truth, exposing just how deep Jennifer's deceit ran. When I arrived, I hesitated outside her door. My heart was pounding in my chest, and the world around me felt muffled, like I was living in a dream. I couldn't understand how it had come to this, how everything I had worked for had been destroyed so easily. I took a deep breath, steeled myself, and knocked. The sound of my fist against the wood echoed in the quiet hallway. Seconds later, Jennifer opened the door, and for a moment, I just stood there, taking her in. She looked the same, put together, confident, as if nothing had happened. She had no idea the emotional war that was raging inside me, the anger that was slowly suffocating everything I had left. "Brian," she said, her voice flat, almost indifferent. "What are you doing here?" I didn't even give her a chance to close the door. I stepped inside, pushing past her with a force that caught her off guard. "We need to talk," I said, my voice low and steady, though I could feel the fire burning behind my words. She stood frozen in the doorway, her expression unreadable. "About what?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "There's nothing left to say." "Oh, there's plenty to say." I shot back, turned to face her. "You lied to me for years. You've been sleeping around, destroying our family, and you think you can just walk away from all of this without any consequences." Her eyes flickered with something, anger, maybe guilt, but she quickly masked it, crossing her arms and leaning against the doorframe. "You're making a scene, Brian. It's over. You and I both know it's been over for a long time. You were just too blind to see it. Too blind." I repeated, my voice rising. "You don't get to blame me for your betrayal. You don't get to pretend this was somehow my fault. You've been lying, cheating, and playing me for a fool. And now you think you can just walk away without any accountability?" Jennifer didn't flinch. She just stood there, her eyes narrowed as if I were the one being unreasonable. "You don't get it, do you? I didn't do this to hurt you. I did this because I couldn't keep pretending. I couldn't keep living a life that wasn't mine. Living a life that wasn't yours." I echoed, the disbelief clear in my voice. "What about our kids, Jennifer? What about them? You don't think they deserve the truth? You don't think they deserve to know who their real father is?" Her expression didn't change, and I could see the wall she had built around herself growing higher, thicker. "They're fine. They'll be fine. They don't need to know anything. And frankly, I don't owe you an explanation about anything anymore. You owe me everything." I shouted, stepping closer to her. "You owe me the truth. You owe me an apology for ruining our family, for destroying everything we worked for. And you owe our kids an explanation for why their lives are being turned upside down." Jennifer's eyes flickered for a moment, and for the first time, I saw a crack in the facade she had so carefully maintained. But it wasn't remorse. It was frustration, maybe even contempt. "I've already told you everything, Brian," she said, her voice tight with irritation. "You were never enough for me. You never listened, never paid attention to what I needed. I didn't ask for this, but it happened. And now it's over." Her words hit me like a slap to the face. How could she be so cold? How could she be so completely indifferent to the destruction she had caused? All the years we spent together, all the sacrifices I made, none of it mattered to her. I took a step back, trying to steady my breathing. The anger inside me was overwhelming, but I knew I had to keep my composure. This wasn't about yelling or throwing things. It was about making her face the consequences of her actions. "You're a coward, Jennifer," I said, my voice low but steady. "You couldn't even be honest with me. Not even once. You destroyed everything, and now you're trying to justify it, trying to make it sound like it was my fault." Jennifer's expression darkened, and she uncrossed her arms, stepping forward. "You're not the victim here, Brian. You've never been the victim. You've been too busy with your job, too busy pretending everything was perfect. I was dying inside, and you didn't even notice." I shook my head, disbelief and anger clouding my mind. "You want to talk about what you needed? What about what I needed, Jennifer? What about what we needed? You think I didn't notice the distance? The coldness between us? But instead of talking, you ran to other men. You ran away from everything we built, and now you're telling me you needed more?" She stared at me for a long moment, and for a brief second, I thought maybe she would finally break. Maybe she would show some kind of remorse. But instead, she just shook her head, as if everything she had done was perfectly justified. "This conversation is over, Brian," she said, her voice final. "I'm done. You need to move on. I'm already gone." And just like that, she turned and walked away, leaving me standing there, the weight of her betrayal pressing down on me with a force I couldn't escape. There was nothing left to say. She had already made her choice. I stood in the middle of her apartment, feeling like I had just lost everything. The love, the family, the life we had, it was all gone. And I was left standing in the wreckage, alone, with nothing but the painful truth. The days after that confrontation were nothing short of a nightmare. I had hoped that by facing Jennifer, by forcing her to confront what she had done, I would find some closure, some piece of the truth that could help me move on. But all I had gotten was more pain, more empty words, and the undeniable realization that I had been living in a house of lies for far too long. She was gone, and I was left picking up the pieces of a shattered life, desperately trying to make sense of it all. There were no apologies, no explanations, and certainly no remorse. She had made her decision, and there was nothing left for me to do but accept it. But accepting it was the hardest thing I had ever done. I couldn't escape the overwhelming feeling of betrayal that seemed to hang in the air like a cloud I couldn't shake. Everywhere I went, everything I did, it felt like the ghosts of our past, of the years I'd spent loving her, were haunting me. The kids were confused, too. They knew something was wrong, but they didn't have the words to understand the depth of the situation. How could I explain to them that their mother, the woman I had promised to love and protect for better or worse, had destroyed our family? How could I even begin to explain why she was no longer there? The weight of it all was suffocating. I had tried to keep it together for them, try to be the father they deserved, but I could feel myself cracking under the pressure. The nights were the worst. When the house was quiet, when I was alone with my thoughts, the truth would come crashing down on me again and again. It was like living in a waking nightmare that I couldn't escape. I spent hours thinking about the man I had become, the man I thought I was. Who was I without her? Without the woman I had built my life around? I had given everything to her, everything I had, and now I was left with nothing. I had tried to distract myself, going to work, spending time with the kids, try to get back into some semblance of normalcy. But it felt like I was pretending, like I was wearing a mask to hide the devastation I felt inside. My mind kept racing, trying to piece together the broken fragments of our life. I thought about the moments, the small signs I had ignored, the late nights, the strange excuses, the way she had distanced herself from me. Had I missed all the signs? Had I been so blind to what was happening under my nose? One evening, I found myself sitting in the living room, staring at the empty space where Jennifer's things used to be. Her absence was more than just physical. It was a gaping hole that swallowed up everything around it. The silence was deafening. I wasn't sure how long I had been sitting there when I heard a knock at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone, but when I opened it, I was surprised to see Mark standing there, his face serious. "Hey, man," he said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "How are you holding up?" I didn't answer at first. How could I answer that? I wasn't holding up. I was barely hanging on. But I knew Mark wouldn't accept silence. He never did. "I'm surviving," I said finally, my voice rough. "That's about it." Mark sat down on the couch, his expression unreadable. "I know you're going through hell right now, but you got to start thinking about what's next. You can't keep wallowing in this. It's not healthy. I don't know what's next," I muttered, my hands shaking. Everything I thought I knew is a lie. How do I move forward from this? Mark looked at me for a long moment before speaking again. "You don't have to do this alone. You got people who care about you. You've got me, and you've got your kids. They need you more than anything right now. You need to find a way to be there for them." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. My kids. I had been so wrapped up in my own pain that I had forgotten about their pain, their confusion, their need for stability. They didn't deserve to be caught in the middle of all this. They needed their father, not the broken man I had become. "You're right," I said quietly, wiping my eyes. "I can't keep doing this. I have to be strong for them. I can't let Jennifer's mess ruin their lives." Mark nodded, his eyes softening. "You're stronger than you think, man. And you're not alone. I'm here. We'll get through this." I didn't know how, but for the first time in days, I felt a small flicker of hope. Maybe Mark was right. Maybe I could start over, rebuild my life, even if it meant doing it without Jennifer. I had to be strong for my kids, for myself. "I'll get through this," I whispered to myself, as if trying to convince my heart that it was possible. "I have to." Mark stayed with me for a while, just talking, making sure I wasn't alone in my thoughts. It felt good to have someone who wasn't judging, who wasn't telling me what I should do, but who was just there. After he left, I sat down with the kids, trying to act normal, trying to reassure them that everything would be okay, even though I wasn't sure if it would be. I looked at them, my kids, the only thing left in this world that mattered. They needed me now more than ever. And I couldn't let Jennifer's betrayal destroy everything I had left. No matter how broken I felt inside, I had to find a way to heal for their sake. It was going to be a long road. I knew that, but I wasn't going to let this define me. I would rebuild. For them. For me. The journey ahead wasn't going to be easy, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let it break me. Not again. The next few weeks were a blur. I barely remembered the days passing by, one after another, as I tried to piece together the wreckage of my life. The world had turned upside down, and all I could do was hold on to the few things that still mattered. The kids and the remnants of who I used to be. The pain didn't go away, of course. It never does. But somehow, I managed to function. To get up every morning, to take care of them, to keep the house running. It was exhausting, but there was no other option. I'd always been the strong one, the one who could take whatever life threw at him. I had to be that way now. For the kids. For myself. I couldn't let Jennifer's betrayal define who I was. I started spending more time with the kids, taking them to the park, playing games, even helping with their schoolwork. They needed me to be present. I couldn't let them feel abandoned by both their mother and father. I knew Jennifer had checked out emotionally long before she physically left, but I didn't want them to feel like I was doing the same. They deserved better than that. One evening, after putting them to bed, I sat on the couch in silence, staring at the walls of the house. Everything felt so different, empty. It was hard to escape the memories of the life I thought I had. I thought about the vacations we'd taken, the dinners we'd shared, the quiet mornings where everything seemed perfect. It was all gone now, but even in the midst of the pain, I knew something was shifting. Slowly, but surely, I was starting to rebuild my life. I wasn't sure what it would look like yet, but I knew it couldn't stay the same. I couldn't keep looking back at what was lost. I had started seeing a therapist. At first, it felt like a waste of time. Talking about my feelings, something I had avoided for years, felt unnatural. But over time, I realized that I needed this. I needed someone to help me to make sense of the mess Jennifer had left behind. I needed to talk through the hurt, the anger, the confusion, and figure out how to heal. But even therapy couldn't fill the void. I spent many nights lying awake, staring at the ceiling, asking myself why it had happened, what I missed, how had I let her get away with it for so long. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that the answers didn't matter anymore. They wouldn't change anything. The truth was that Jennifer had made her choice, and there was nothing I could do to undo it. I couldn't keep living in the past, searching for answers that would never come. One day, as I picked up the kids from school, I saw something in their eyes, something I hadn't seen in a while. Hope. They were starting to move on. They were starting to heal, just like I was. They didn't need to see me fall apart anymore. They needed to see me be strong. They needed to know that life could still be good, that there was still joy to be found in the world, even if it looked different than it had before. I took them to their favorite ice cream shop, trying to pretend that everything was normal, that this was just another day. But deep down, I knew that nothing would ever be the same. And in a way, I was okay with that. Maybe things weren't supposed to be the same. Maybe this was a chance for all of us to grow, to change, to become stronger. Later that evening, after the kids had gone to bed, I sat down with a glass of whiskey in my hand, staring out at the dark sky. The silence in the house felt louder than anything. The absence of Jennifer was a constant reminder of what had happened, of the family I had lost. But as the days went by, I began to feel something else, peace. A quiet, steady peace that grew inside me as I focused on what I could control. I had to remind myself that I wasn't alone. I had my friends, my family, and, most importantly, I had my kids. They were my reason to keep going, to keep moving forward. I couldn't let them down. One afternoon, Mark stopped by the house again, as he had been doing more and more often. It had been a few weeks since Jennifer had left, and I was starting to feel the weight of things lift ever so slightly. Not that I had forgotten what had happened, but I was starting to accept it. "You're looking better," Mark said as he sat down on the couch, eyeing me carefully. You're handling things better than I expected. I didn't know whether to take that as a compliment or an insult. I'm just trying to get through the day, I replied, giving him a half smile. It's hard, but I got to keep it together. Mark nodded. I get it, but I've been thinking. You've been so focused on holding everything together for the kids, you haven't had a chance to think about yourself. You need to start living for you again. I paused, considering his words. I don't know what that means anymore. Everything I thought I knew is gone. I feel like I'm starting over from scratch. You are, he said, a small smile tugging at his lips. But that's not a bad thing. You've been given the chance to rebuild, to create something new, something better. You're not the same person you were before this all happened. You're stronger, wiser. You just have to let yourself embrace that. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that this could be the beginning of something better, something more fulfilling. But it was hard to imagine. It was hard to picture a future where I wasn't defined by Jennifer's betrayal, where I wasn't constantly looking back at the life I had lost. But Mark was right. I had a choice. I could keep living in the past, or I could start building a future. And as much as it terrified me, I knew which path I had to take. For the first time since Jennifer left, I realized something important. It wasn't just about getting through the days. It was about finding a way to live again. And that was the hardest, most rewarding thing I could do for myself and for my kids. I woke up the next morning with a new sense of clarity. It was as though something in me had shifted overnight, a small change that I could feel in my bones. It wasn't that the pain had gone away. It hadn't, and it likely never would. But something about the way I looked at the world had changed. I couldn't control the past, but I could control what came next. I had spent so long stuck in the past, in the betrayal, in the anger, in the sorrow. I had been living in a world where everything I had known had been upended, and I had been consumed by the need for answers, for closure. But as I sat there, staring at the stillness of the morning light filtering through the window, I realized that I didn't need those answers anymore. The pieces of my life that had been torn apart could never be put back together in the same way, and that was okay. I was learning, slowly but surely, to accept the reality of what had happened. Jennifer had made her choices, and I had to live with the consequences. But I didn't have to stay trapped in that moment. I didn't have to let her actions define me any longer. I spent the day with the kids, doing things we used to enjoy. We went to the park, played basketball in the driveway, laughed and joked as if everything were normal again. I could see the small changes in them, too. The light that had dimmed in their eyes when Jennifer left was slowly starting to return. They were healing just like me. As much as I wanted to shield them from the pain of it all, I knew that they needed to see me move forward. They needed to see that life could still be good, that they could still be happy, even in the face of everything that had fallen apart. It wasn't going to be easy, but it was possible. That night, after putting the kids to bed, I sat down on the couch, a warm cup of tea in my hands. The house was quiet again. The silence was different now. It wasn't suffocating like it had been at first. It was a space that I could fill with the things that truly mattered, my kids, my friends, my own growth. I thought back to the conversation Mark and I had a few days ago. You're not the same person you were before this, he had said. And he was right. I wasn't. I had always thought of myself as strong, dependable, the rock that everyone else leaned on. But in reality, I had been so focused on holding everything together that I had lost sight of myself. I had been so consumed by Jennifer's betrayal that I forgot about my own needs, my own happiness. I had allowed myself to be defined by her actions, by what she had done to me. But I didn't want to be that person anymore. It was time to rebuild, not just for the kids, but for myself. I wasn't going to let this define the rest of my life. I wasn't going to let one broken chapter dictate the story of who I was becoming. The truth was, Jennifer had given me a gift, even if it hadn't felt that way at the time. She had forced me to confront the parts of myself I had been ignoring, the parts of myself that I needed to heal. I had always thought that love meant sacrificing everything for the other person. But now, I knew that love also meant knowing when to stand up for yourself, when to say enough, and when to let go of the things that no longer served you. The next day, I took a step I had been putting off for weeks. I called a lawyer. I wasn't sure what the future held, but I knew that I needed to take control of my own life. I needed to start making decisions for myself, not out of anger or hurt, but from a place of clarity. When I walked into the lawyer's office, I felt a sense of power that I hadn't felt in a long time. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was choosing my path. I was choosing to move forward, no matter how difficult or painful that might be. The lawyer asked me all the standard questions about custody, about the house, about the financials, but it didn't feel like a battle. It felt like a necessary step. I wasn't fighting Jennifer. I wasn't fighting anyone. I was fighting for my own future. I was fighting to create a life that wasn't shaped by the past. As I left the lawyer's office, I felt lighter. I still had a long way to go, but I had taken the first step, and that felt like progress. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living. Over the next few weeks, things started to shift even more. I found myself laughing again, truly laughing at things I hadn't found funny in a long time. I started reconnecting with friends I had lost touch with over the years, going out for drinks, having conversations that weren't about pain or betrayal, but about life and possibility. I even started thinking about what I wanted for myself, outside of being a father. I had spent so many years focusing on what Jennifer needed, on what the kids needed, that I had forgotten what I needed. I wasn't sure what that looked like yet, but I knew I wanted something more than the life I had been living. I started working out again, something I had neglected for years. It felt good to take care of myself, to feel strong in my own body. And slowly, I began to find pieces of myself that I thought were long gone. I wasn't the man I had been before Jennifer left, and I wasn't the broken man I had been when she first walked out. I was someone new, someone stronger, someone who had the power to choose his own path. I still had moments where the pain would hit me like a wave. There were nights when I would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I had done enough, if I had been enough. But those moments were fewer now. The healing was slow, but it was real, and each day, I became more and more certain that I was on the right path. And then one evening, as I was tucking the kids into bed, my youngest, Ethan, looked up at me with a smile that felt like a ray of sunshine piercing through the clouds. "Dad," he said, "I'm glad we're okay." In that moment, I knew we were. We were all okay. We had been through the storm, but we had weathered it, and we would keep moving forward together.